Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a story that's about 2,600 years old, but you'll see it holds an incredibly powerful map for dealing with the challenges we all face right now. It's a journey about finding real, lasting freedom, and it's actually the foundation of what's known as the Raft to Freedom program. So let's just dive right in. The whole journey starts with this feeling, right here. Seeing a world in conflict, people fighting, and that deep, personal sense of fear that bubbles up inside. I mean, this isn't just some ancient quote, is it? It's a feeling we all know. And this is exactly where a young man named Gotama, who would become the Buddha, began his search. You know, the Raft program has a name for this starting point. It calls it our dangerous shore. It's that familiar, uncomfortable place where our old habits and compulsions just feel like they're running the show. And look, before you can leave any place, you first have to really understand where you are.
Now, you might be thinking this dangerous shore must be a place of, obvious struggle or poverty. But what if it isn't? What's so powerful about Gotama's story is that it shows us this shore can exist even inside a gilded cage, surrounded by literally every luxury you can imagine. I mean, just look at this contrast. It's so stark. On the one hand, a life of unbelievable privilege. Fine silks, palaces for every season, constant parties. But on the other hand, a deep, growing inner turmoil. This just goes to show that our patterns of escape, they're not really about what we have on the outside. They're about this deep, internal unease that no amount of stuff can ever truly fix. Gotama started to realize he was living in a kind of denial, which he called being intoxicated. And he didn't mean by drugs or alcohol. He meant he was intoxicated by the delusions of youth, health, and life itself. He was so caught up in his own strength and vitality that he was basically ignoring the one thing that's true for everyone. We all get old, we all get sick, and we all die. And he describes this inner feeling with this really powerful image, a hidden arrow embedded in the heart. He says it's so very hard to see because it's not a physical wound. It's the subtle, constant pain of our own cravings and confusion. And that is what makes us run around in every direction, desperately looking for a piece we can never seem to find. So finally seeing this truth, that something was deeply wrong, even when his life looked absolutely perfect on the outside, it pushed him to make a radical choice. This was the turning point. This was what changed everything. And right here, he made this absolutely crucial distinction. He realized his whole life had been what he called an ignoble search, basically chasing lasting happiness in things that by their very nature can't possibly last. So he made a choice. He decided to abandon that dead-end street and begin the noble search for a kind of freedom that was real, something that could actually last. And this noble search, it wasn't some vague, mystical thing. No way. It was a rigorous, methodical, 6-year investigation. You could say he was gathering the materials to build his raft, and he was testing every single piece of wood, every rope, to see what was strong enough to actually get him across the water. Let's just quickly trace this incredible journey. First, he walks away from his old life entirely. Then he goes and finds the best meditation teachers of his time and masters everything they can teach him. But he knows it's still not the complete answer. So what does he do? He pivots to the complete opposite extreme, testing the absolute limits of self-denial and punishment for years, only to find that that didn't work either. It was this careful process of elimination that finally led him to his breakthrough. So, he'd already lived the first extreme, right? His life back in the palace proved that just chasing pleasure, while it feels good for a minute, is ultimately a dead end. It's just a hamster wheel of always wanting more, and it never ever leads to real, lasting contentment. Then he tried the other extreme. Years of really harsh practices that nearly killed him, but that was also a dead end. All it did was exhaust his body and weaken his mind, which made it impossible to find any real wisdom. He learned a really powerful lesson here. You cannot punish yourself into a state of peace. Okay, so after totally rejecting both of these extremes, pleasure-seeking on one side and self-punishment on the other, he was finally ready for a real insight. This is where he discovers the core principle that would become the foundation for everything he taught. He discovered what he called the middle way, and it's really a path of radical balance. It wasn't about fighting his body or punishing his cravings. It was about wisely and kindly building himself up, gathering the inner strength and clarity he needed to finally build that raft and get to the other shore.
And here's what's so amazing. This insight from 2,600 years ago lines up perfectly with what modern science is telling us today. Neuroscience confirms our brains can literally rewire themselves. That's neuroplasticity. Psychology talks about the hedonic treadmill, which is the exact same ignoble search Gotama figured out. And so much of philosophy is about finding meaning not by running away from life's problems, but by facing them. So, why does this ancient story matter so much for us right here, right now? Well, it's because it gives us the blueprint for our own journey to freedom, which is what the Raft program is all about. Gautama's whole story is a perfect map of the Raft program. It starts with R for recognize, having the guts to see our situation clearly, just like he recognized that arrow in his heart. Then comes A for abandon, letting go of the stuff that doesn't work, just like he abandoned the two extremes. Then we have F for freedom, the realization that a new way is possible, which was his discovery of the middle way. And finally, T for train, that active, dedicated process of his 6-year search. Think about it, his entire journey kicked off with that one crucial first step, R, for recognize. It all began the moment he had the courage to just stop running, to turn around and to acknowledge the arrow in his own heart, and to do it without blame, but with real compassion. That's the starting point for any of us. Now, this whole framework, which draws so much from Gotama's journey, is laid out in detail in the Raft to Freedom workbook. It was written by Dr. Catherine Jacob and Vince Cullen, and they have generously made all 67 chapters completely free to download at raftfreedom.org. So, as we wrap this up, I just want to leave you with this question to think about. After hearing about Gautama's journey through the extremes of indulgence and self-harm, what might a more compassionate, more balanced, middle way look like in your own life? Gautama's teachings never promised an easy, pain-free life. They were never about a quick fix. What they did promise was that with care, with attention, a deep and unshakable peace was possible. And that's a truth he lived right to the very end, and it's captured so perfectly in his final words to his followers.